Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I got to talk to the author of The Architect Way and the founder of Databaller. Darryl Kanouse joined me today, and Darryl is going to really come at leadership from a different perspective, a philosophical perspective, having to do a lot with ancient wisdom. Darryl is going to talk a lot about using a balanced approach when it comes to leadership, decision making, problem solving, how you can really balance your philosophical fluidity and your technical knowledge and balance those all together to come up with some great decisions when it comes to being a leader. This is an interesting conversation that you're about to hear. You don't want to miss a second. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. And I can't wait to get to this gentleman today. He's going to talk about leadership from such a different philosophical perspective. And I was telling him right before I hit record that a lot of things he talks about I haven't really heard before. And so I can't wait to get his advice and hear his story. So the author of The Architect Way and the founder of Databaller, Darryl Kanouse, has joined me today. Darryl, it is so great to meet you and connect with you. How are you doing there, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And thanks for having me on.
It is absolutely my pleasure. My pleasure. Tell us your backstory and how you got interested in some of the philosophical and just the great things that you talk about and how you tie it in with leadership. I think is just amazing. But tell us your backstory and what's led you to where you're at right now.
Yeah, that's great. So I started my career as a software developer, technologist, moved into leadership roles, tech director, that kind of thing. And then eventually took on a solution architecture as kind of a product development, technical product development path for myself. And so I'm doing that for about 25-ish years or so. And then at the same time, in my personal life, I've always been interested in Eastern philosophies. They've kind of resonated with me. I've enjoyed the kind of pragmatic aspects of it and the ways in which I felt I could integrate some of the ideas into my personal life pretty easily. And then gradually over the years, as I started really understanding more about how to operate in both a Buddhist and a Taoist way and thinking about balance, I found it started creeping into my professional life as well. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm thinking about solutions to build, ideas of balance and simplicity and a lot of the topics that you'll see covered in those philosophies started to make a lot of sense in the context of the things that I was building. And so as I started to see myself kind of leaning in on some of these ideas at work, simultaneously, I had a bit of a career change. Or I had moved from working at Amazon to working at Canva. And one of the things that I noticed was that there was an enormous cultural difference between those two companies. Mm-hmm. And that they, Amazon operates in a very like document-driven, process-oriented approach to things where everything is pretty buttoned up. Whereas Canva, as a cultural kind of phenomenon that it represents, and it's really been taking off and it's been successful. It's operated mostly on intuition, and the folks there are, they move very quickly, and it's a very it's a lively environment to work in. You could also probably say it's a little bit undisciplined, and so I found myself having a bit of a cultural whiplash, and it occurred to me that what I could actually lean on and still find myself delivering results and moving quickly and building great solutions was leaning back on the principles that I had picked up through the Taoist approach and that kind of thinking. And so, it seemed like the natural sort of thing to share with other folks then was that, hey, maybe there's a kind of a universal framework that you can apply to any of these situations, regardless of the cultural context. And you can apply this framework and get results, move quickly, and still do great work, and not necessarily feel that sort of cultural whiplash in the different environments.
Wow. Man, I love that. And so working on intuition, I love that. Let's get more into it because I'm fascinated to hear more about Eastern philosophy. And you talk about, and it really helps with a balanced approach to leadership, to decision making, to problem solving. Go into some detail on that. What specific things help you with those things, and what help leaders out there today?
Yeah, so I think that the sort of starting point for a lot of the kind of thinking that goes behind this philosophy is recognizing that harmony and sustainability are inherent goods and virtues in the things that you're owning and building and running.
Hmm.
And so when you take that view that those can be a North Star, or at least an attribute that you can aspire to in all of your systems, the Taoist approach has a really great mental model and view for how to get there, how to get to a place of harmony and a place of sustainability. And it's through the application of what I think are basically four core principles, and it's interconnectedness, adaptability, balance, and simplicity.
Mm.
And early on, as you start thinking about these ideas, you may find it almost feels like a checklist to go through in your decision making, where you might ask yourself, in the decision I'm about to make, and what are the balances here? Like, what are the trade-offs I might need to consider, and how do I make sure that I have those in mind as I make my decisions? Or simplicity and the idea that just to pause and ask yourself, is there value here in everything that I'm doing? Do I really need to add this feature? Do I really need to build this or invest in this particular area?
Hmm.
And so I think you'll find that in the beginning, it does sort of feel a bit like a checklist, but because they work so well together, each of those ideas of the interconnectedness and your ability to adapt to that, and how that leads to balance, and ultimately there's a simplicity to all that. Because it works together so well, you do start to internalize it. And then that's where the intuition starts to grow, so that eventually you get to a point where you can look at systems and you can look at processes and organizations and just recognize, hey, there's an imbalance here. This is not in harmony, or there's opportunities to simplify.
Wow, I love that. What was some of the reaction and response that you started to get, Darryl, as you started to implement this into your professional life?
Um, so it's mixed. I think everybody comes to the table, they come to work with their own perspectives and views on things. And
Mm.
me being primarily a technologist and working with other technical folks, it's an industry that's driven by precision and detail. And a lot of what I think is liberating about this philosophy, and it does allow you to move faster, is being more comfortable in some ambiguities.
Mm.
And there's a concept in Taoism, Wu Wei, which is translated, depending on who's doing the translation, is generally like a effortless action, might be how you would describe that, or a kind of in a flow state where things move really they move naturally and they move correctly. They move, with all of the virtues and attributes that we expect them to. And that takes some preparation, and it's part of the intuition. A lot of that stuff doesn't immediately sit well with folks who are documentation oriented and very prescriptive in their approaches, and really want things detailed out in their processes. And so there's a little bit of convincing to do. And my approach to adopting this kind of philosophy and to giving it a try is very similar to my approach to how you would do any sort of new feature development or product piece, which is try to consider it an experiment, see if
Mm.
it works, measure the results. Are you able to move faster? Are you more efficient in your resources? Consider putting some metrics around the application of this philosophy. And if you think through it for a few months, and you should be able to measure and see that it works.
Well, and now as you're starting to talk about measurement, now you're really talking a language that these leaders will understand, right? Oh,
Right.
okay, I can, yeah. Um, I'm curious how this works in some other aspects of business, such as hiring, or when you're trying to help someone get promoted, or maybe you've come to the decision that this company is not the right one for them. How does this help when you're dealing with the people aspect of the business?
Yeah, the one of the underlying aspects of the overall philosophy is a recognition of of an ethics behind it, and there's a belief that if you if you take on these ideas of simplicity and balance and adaptability and interconnectedness and recognize harmony and sustainability as core virtues, that you start to act more authentically, and you will have a consistency in your life where your home life and your work life can have the same sort of ethical import for you. And so this is basically all to say that when you are then confronted with those sort of people situations where either you're hiring, or you want to encourage someone to transition into a different role, or maybe move out of the company and find a different career, that you can do it from a place of compassion and balance and understanding, and convey that in a way, hopefully, that resonates with the individual that you're working with and that you're talking to. um, and and it's in that sort of recognition of the balance of what's best for that individual and what's best for say the company that they're working at. And you can both acknowledge where there are some deficiencies perhaps in performance, but then also recognize that there's in the balance what the virtues or the better qualities are of that candidate. And in doing that, you just set a better environment for everybody to succeed. And even if that choice is to move on to another role, they may leave that interaction with you still feeling good about it, feeling good about their time with you and their time at the company, and hopefully appreciating that, yeah, maybe there's opportunities to improve, or maybe there's a different, better role for them. So I think that's the good consequence of living authentically, which is a sort of a result of this, the balance and simplicity and adaptability that you would bring to your life.
Yeah, I love all of what you're saying, because it's not only combining, a lot of the philosophical knowledge that you have, but now you're bringing in ethics, you're bringing in, your values, and you're showing up in a much, I think, more meaningful way as you're dealing with people. Um, I want to ask something that I saw on your website, and see a little bit more. If you can expand a little bit more, you have here balancing technical rigidity, being rigid, right, with philosophical fluidity. Talk to us about that and what that means.
Yeah. So the first line of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao that can be talked about isn't the eternal Tao. And I think that the notion there is that the Tao being, the universe, the way of the universe, this sort of bigger than we can really understand and describe thing,
Hmm.
is bigger than we can really understand and describe. So whatever you're going to document about it, there's a little bit more to it than that. And and so the first line of the Architect Way, my book, which is an adaptation, taking the language of the Tao Te Ching and putting it into the language of technology development and kind of business leadership and technical strategies. The first line there is the architecture that can be fully documented isn't going to be the full architecture,
Mm.
because and this is the intention is to sort of expand your view of what constitutes an architecture, and a recognition of all of the things that are connected to the systems that we build that are sort of out of our view, that will have an influence on our system that we need to account for. And so that's sort of the balance that I think that comes with that understanding, is that we can build rigid technical systems, or we may think that they are rigid, but when you recognize their connectedness and your need to adapt, you start to build in mechanisms where there's a flexibility, and that's basically the call out between those two, and that balancing. there's another kind of metaphor that you can apply maybe to the situation, which is one of in actual physical, like building architecture. When I live in California, earthquakes are very, very common. And so it's, surprisingly, maybe the buildings that are the most earthquake resistant are those ones that have a little bit of flexibility in them, that where they put the rollers at the bottom. And I'm not a engineering, not that kind of an engineer, so I don't know exactly the details, but this part I do understand is that the buildings need to sway and the buildings need to sort of move with that. And that's a similar kind of view that you can apply to building technical systems.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And then you apply that to leadership. I mean, some of the best leaders I know have that flexibility built in with them as well.
Mhm.
I love that. And so, what are some of the philosophical keys to success? How do you, what are some things that you've learned with your experience over the years in your studies that are really a couple of great keys to success philosophically?
Uh, yeah, so adaptability and simplicity would probably be the two that, at least from a leadership perspective, uh, I have gotten the most mileage out of. And so that's, there's a common saying that, or at least it's becoming common around um, strong beliefs held loosely. And so the idea that you can have your, be true to what your mission is, and be passionate about pursuing that mission, um, but be open-minded and understand that the path to getting there, can be varied. And so there's a, taking that to heart, I think has been great, as for me and my own personal leadership style. And then the question of simplicity, I think, is one that I think that's just it's a great one for both leaders and for folks that might be individual contributors or whatever, where you can do a critical evaluation of the value that you're adding and the value of the things of the choices that you're making. And especially in a world that's becoming increasingly complex with so many different factors, and with a lot of digital noise, it's easy to kind of get distracted and lost in that complexity. And so remaining focused and narrowing the things you take on, and the decisions that you make, and the projects that you initiate into those a nice simple set of things that will achieve your goals and your values. Yeah, so those have been the two that have been the most useful for me.
Yeah. Oh, those are awesome, Darryl. I love them. What's your hope here in terms of how because you're combining a few things here, which I think are fantastic, a really good intersection here. What's your hope first on how this might really change the work culture going forward? And I'm going to ask you what's your hope how it changes just our culture, period. But what's your hope first on the work culture, on what changes would you like to see or have you already seen?
Mhm. So I think that there's two areas in work cultures. This is it's a pretty ground level kind of pragmatic assessment. Uh, the first is for small teams. If adopting these principles, I think, will allow small teams to both move quicker, but also do it in a way where the systems that they're building are become more sustainable. It's very common for, whether it's startups or just smaller teams that are just trying to get products off the ground, to sometimes take shortcuts to move quickly, which is reasonable. You want to deliver value as quickly as you can. However, I think if you adopt this sort of universal framework in the model that's being presented with the Taoist ideas, you can still move very quickly, but do it in a way that lays a foundation for everything to move more naturally and the flow to occur. It may feel like there's a little bit more work up front, but in fact, you'll actually find yourself moving much faster
Mm-hmm.
and being more sustainable, and not having to go back and undo things you may have done.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part is in larger organizations. It's very common. Siloing is a common problem, where teams will pick up projects, they'll work on them, they'll decide that there are features that they want to add, and they'll kind of continue to evolve their products, and new features will kind of come like barnacles on those. And then when it's time to integrate, the two teams that hadn't worked together find the integration now requires a whole nother set of work. And um, I would love to see less siloing and more integrated communication which is that recognition of the interconnectedness of all of our systems and the adaptability. And I think if folks in these larger organizations think through this philosophy, they'll find there's more communication and things will just flow easier in this recognition of balance. And again, going back to the simplicity of the core value that your team is adding to the bigger picture, recognizing that other teams are adding values in other ways and making sure that you work together. So those are the kind of work culture things that I think I would probably like to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved all of that. And it almost sounds like, cause you see in a lot of companies, I love that you said siloing, because that, when you see that in a lot of companies, you see some departments don't value other departments or think that, hey, it's all about us, where nothing can run without us. But if we've got that connectiveness, as you said, together, we could make changes as we need and build in all the stuff that you talked about. I think that's awesome. What's your hope on our culture? Because I love that you started talking about how you implemented a lot of this in your personal life, right from the beginning. What's a couple of things you'd like to see just overall in our culture today change as a result, or become more educated on some of the Eastern philosophy and some of the things that you're talking about?
So I have found that my personal take on the events of the world, and the whether it's politics or any other sort of cultural phenomenon that can be polarizing, that the extremes of that polarization are not, they speak to a disharmony, and the Taoist notion of harmony as a core virtue leads to a tendency to want to reconcile these polarities, I guess you could say. And if I find myself, in a place where I identify too strongly with one of these sort of poles, that to me is a clue that I'm not really balanced in my perspective, and that I'm not really looking through, what are the all of the implications and the interconnected nature of the problems that we're all sort of facing. And as a recognition of adaptability as an important attribute and a personal attribute, understanding perspectives, seeing the balance, all those have helped me. And this is what my hope would be for other folks, that they would get the same value out of it. It has helped me feel less of the anxiety that comes with the positioning yourself further away, more to the extremes. And so there's just I think a general understanding of people and the complexity and of stuff and what's important. I think if we culturally took a moment to reflect on balance in our lives and the balance in how we see things, and are we considering how our lives integrate with other lives, and are the connectedness we have with other lives, and how we might need to adapt to ensure that everybody is living their best life and flourishing. I think all of that would produce a better, more I'm going to say like happier. The word's not, I think flourishing is probably the best word that comes to mind, where we can all flourish together and feel as though we're flourishing and feel unencumbered by the social constraints that sometimes we feel if we can adapt these ideas.
Yeah, Darryl, that is first of all, I love your vision there, and it's it is, I think it's possible. I really do. And I love that you said it's just more than happiness, right? It goes a lot more beyond that if we just can just connect with each other a little bit more. And that's, I think, where it starts. Dal, it's amazing. I mean, you really broke down the tie-in to what you're doing with leadership, and I knew you would, because you break it down brilliantly, not just on your site. And what I saw of your book, I haven't gotten it yet, but I want to give you now some time. Talk about your book, how folks can get it, and also how folks can connect with you a little bit further.
Yeah. So the book is available on Amazon. It's both an ebook and a paperback. It'll be an audiobook soon enough. It is a adaptation of the Tao Te Ching, which means that it follows the same format. The Tao Te Ching, it's 81 versus chapters. The Architect Way is 81 versus chapters. The language is I'm apprehensive of saying translation, so that's why I'm saying adaptation. But the format and the overall themes are mirrored in the two books. And so, just like the Tao Te Ching, in the Architect Way, you can open it to any page really, and consume the page for what it is, and it's a self-contained idea or concept about technology development and the related issues. And so, I think folks would really enjoy it, for that.
Awesome.
And then just in terms of getting in touch with me, LinkedIn, I actually spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, Darryl Kanouse at LinkedIn. And then I do still have my Twitter account. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that that X will evolve into something that we can all enjoy. We'll see how that goes. The thing is, I've got a 3-letter handle, which for so many years, I was so proud of being such an early adopter and having that 3-letter Twitter handle that's unfortunately been the reason why I haven't just abandoned it entirely, because I don't want to give that little source of pride.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you do have a website as well. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kanouse.net is
Okay.
and you'll find there not only the information about the book and my company, but many other projects I've worked on over the years.
Yeah, you're being a little modest. Your website is awesome because I was on there. And tell us a little bit about Databaller. What is that?
So Databaller, product development company focused on consumer engagement technologies, so data-driven consumer engagement technologies, so personalization systems and that type of thing. Very much in line with the principles of the Architect Way and the Taoist idea. So it's we're focused on simplicity of integration. It's really API-driven things, understanding this connected to other systems. So our clients come with a bunch of other internal tools for doing their marketing automation. We plug in really nicely, and but yeah, so that's what Databaller is.
Awesome. Darryl, this has been amazing, and congratulations on everything. Continue to do the work that you're doing. You really come to the table with just a great, unique perspective on not just leadership, on a lot of things. And so keep doing it. I think your hopes that you have about changing the culture at work, as well as just our culture in general, I can envision that, man. So keep doing the work you're doing, and just that's all I can say. Keep doing the work you're doing.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me on. This has really been a great conversation, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Darryl. Let's leave it there, folks. This has been Kenny and Darryl, the Leading from the Middle podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.